Hello, everyone. This is Horizon Studies, and what we'll be going over today is evaluating the amphibious capabilities of the People's Liberation Army and its components, and examining what capabilities they currently have, and looking at the operational environment as a whole. We'll be using the United States Army's FM 3-0 to look at understanding all the potential variables that would be crucial in the event of an invasion. And just some background on myself, I am a junior officer in the United States Army with a background in infantry. In college, I studied international affairs, and the kind of hope for this channel is to kind of look at where the military and global affairs kind of meet together in terms of geopolitics, and kind of look at how um, the capabilities that a military might have is going to affect the possible outcomes of any potential conflict in the future. First and foremost, let's take a look at the 10,000-foot overview and the general task that the People's Republic of China would be looking to achieve in an amphibious invasion. The Taiwan Strait itself is roughly 80 miles wide, 128 kilometers at its closest point right here, and separates mainland China, controlled by the People's Republic of China, and the island of Taiwan, controlled by the Republic of China. The strait is the only barrier between the two separate governments and is one of the main reasons that Taiwan can remain an island enjoying some semblance of freedom from mainland China. There's no potential way for the Chinese to successfully take over Taiwan without a significant amphibious component involved in the plan, so there's much to gain from looking at what many analysts have come to describe as the Million Man Swim. What is the operational environment? The operational environment is a dynamic composite of conditions, circumstances, and influences that shape the decisions of the unit commander and the deployment and employment of military forces, as well as other instruments of national power. It encompasses all variables that affect where soldiers will train or fight. This framework will allow us to look at the situation as a whole and to avoid missing crucial considerations that high level officials will have to account for in the event of an invasion. In true Army fashion, we have a convenient acronym for remembering these factors, as in, like to say it's PMESI PT. This stands for political, military, economic, social, information, infrastructure, physical environment, and time. Each of these variables looks at a specific aspect of the planning considerations, and some have more important implications than others in certain conditions, but nonetheless represents a full picture of what needs to be inspected prior to any action of any plan. So starting off for the political variable, we're going to be looking at anything that the CCP has control over and how decision making would be distributed within the Chinese government to make a move on Taiwan. When looking specifically at the smaller operational component of the amphibious portion of the invasion, there's no unique or specific political variable that originates from this portion. Instead, we're going to be kind of looking at the 10,000-foot political variable that surrounds the invasion of Taiwan, and will reference Xi Jinping's own words in his speech on September 30th, 2024, at the Great Hall of People on China's 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Xi prominently stated to his countrymen that, quote, blood runs thicker than water, end quote, and in reference to sharing. To the shared blood between those living on Taiwan and those living on mainland China, and that, quote, complete reunification is the common aspiration of all Chinese from home and abroad. It is an irresistible trend and a righteous cause reflecting the will of the people. No one can stop the wheel of history. End quote. This clearly demonstrates the most important leader in China's opinion and goals for Taiwan, and we must not make the same mistake that we did in the West in regard to Vladimir Putin and his longtime statements about reunification with Ukraine and the former Soviet states. The writing was on the wall for a long time about what these autocratic leaders and what Putin wanted, but Western observers and analysts failed to take these claims as truthful promises. This means that the driver, metaphorically and partially, of the Chinese people, who, in a 2022 survey conducted by the Edelman Trust Barometer, had a staggering 91% trust in their government compared to a 39% trust that was in the United States. And this was following a very intense zero COVID policy that was ongoing for 2 years prior. The overall trust in the government stems deeply from their massive economic success over the past 40 years and bringing hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. The political will of the CCP in the event of an invasion of Taiwan will have little resistance from the opposition voices in the Chinese government and will largely be supported by the citizens of China for at least the initial phase of this conflict. So for the military, if we don't limit this in scope somehow to focus on what specifically they would use or be critically reliant on the specifics of a Chinese amphibious invasion, then we would be here explaining it until it finally happened in real life. So in the interest of keeping the main thing, I'm going to be focusing on what equipment and troops would be needed to execute this 85-mile journey across the Taiwan Strait. Two crucial categories I argue that will make or break the chances of a successful landing on an enemy beachhead on Taiwan is the amphibious armored vehicles China has available to them and the landing craft slash amphibious assault ships that they have in their inventory. I argue this is the most important piece of determining the success of a Chinese amphibious invasion because these vehicles and ships will allow the People's Liberation Army Navy and their Marines the best chance of establishing a secure beachhead and not getting completely wiped off of the beach. That will allow for follow on of further troops to start taking the island. Um, the use of direct fire weapon systems on the infantry fighting vehicles and the amphibious light tanks will give the Marines the local fire support necessary in a fight that will be limited on the amount of indirect fire assets that they will have available to them on the beach, which are not going to be present in an amphibious operation, like because you can't have mortars and you can't have artillery floating on the water. So that's going to be something out of the picture for them that they're going to have to be relying on for capabilities that they have organic to those vehicles. Okay, so looking at the modern Chinese Navy's available landing craft that can be assessed as competent and not completely outdated, you're looking at about 75 craft that vary from sophisticated amphibious assault ships akin to like the USS Essex and the Type 075, which is up here in the right hand corner. Again, it's got a helicopter deck where it can support like support helicopters or attack helicopters with a bay in the back for a floatable well so that vehicles can come out of the rear and start heading towards the beach. But then also too, they have ships that look like they missed the D-Day invasion in 1944 with the like Type 079, which also makes up around 30 ships of that 75 ship figure, which you can see down here. Basically, drop ramp designs. They have to come up on shore and drop the ramp, or else they're not going to be able to offload the cargo that they had. And speaking of cargo, the cargo in which these ships can hold varies, but a general figure for most of the smaller landing craft, excluding the larger Type 075s, it involves about 1 to 2 main battle tanks, if that. But I've seen some figures quoted for that, but generally they're going to hold about 4 to 6 IFV APC, which is infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers variants, with the ability to in total hold about 250 fully equipped soldiers. The larger ships, such as the Type 075, with no official published capacity, is about 85% of the tonnage that the USS Essex is. And with that ship, it can support and deploy about 2,000 Marines via air and through amphibious deployment. So I would put the Type 075 in that 1,700 range of troops available to deploy. Okay, and so on to the as for the amphibious IFVs and the APCs, I will be mainly looking at the ZBD-05 IFV, which is going to be up here in the top right hand corner, the ZBL-09 APC, again in the center here, and then the ZTD-05, which is in the bottom right hand corner. I believe the quantity necessary of these vehicles is kind of irrelevant in this circumstance and it would be much more beneficial to kind of look at it in a sense of how many can be deployed at a time in that first initial wave of an assault. According to the Worldwide Equipment Guide by Training and Doctrine Command or TRADOC in the U.S. Army, the ZBD-05 and the ZBL-09 are the primary vehicles that would be chosen to embark on the first and most important wave of the assault. So the ZBD-05 IFV, crewed by 3, can carry squad-sized elements, generally 9 to 10 individuals, is what I saw it quoted at. Is armed with a 30 millimeter autocannon here, pretty formidable main armament, and then it is well equipped to face other IFVs or APCs that Taiwan may have present and can support dismounts with adequate direct fire support. And it also, too, importantly, has the ability to swim at 25 kilometers an hour, which is a pretty good pace for a floating piece of steel. Um, and then looking at the ZBL-09, again, crewed by three, holds can carry around seven personnel. Um, I say this generally can tread water 4 to 8 kilometers an hour. This is a very slow moving vehicle through the water. This is going to be something that higher leadership has to take into account because say that the ZBD-05 and the ZTD are just blasting ahead of the ZBL, then that's going to be an issue of coordination of timing and ensuring that everyone is on the same sheet of music. But back to the ZBL, it can, um, again, it's also armed with a 30 millimeter autocannon, which kind of slightly differs from the American idea of an armored personnel carrier in the Striker, in which it's not necessarily supposed to have the meanest gun around to be able to defend itself, but it's more kind of viewed as a battle taxi. And that's something that is going to be crucial to the Chinese amphibious invasion because not only will they likely have the armored version, which has a 30 millimeter autocannon. They're probably going to have electronic warfare units, engineering assets, medical units. This is going to be the workhorse of moving equipment and personnel around on the battlefield, especially those enablers, which are going to help get through the Taiwanese defenses and to help support the main operation of the infantry pushing onto the beach. With the ZTD-05 light tank, it is going to be the powerhouse of where the People's Liberation Army Navy is looking to get its fire support from. So this is going to be, it's a 105 millimeter cannon, a rifled cannon that will be crucial to establishing the beachhead. The speed of this tank is around that of the ZBD-05, so it's going to be a more quickly moving direct fire support vehicle, and the Army's kind of looking at something similar to this right now. If you're familiar with the M10 Booker, it's starting to come out in little waves. I believe the 82nd Airborne is going to be getting those pretty soon. But the idea of having a mobile support vehicle, which they can have a lighter tank, but also bring it onto the battlefield and provide necessary fires against enemy fortifications or potential enemy obstacles that are blocking the way for the ZBD-05 and the ZBL-09 to make way onto um, the battlefield. Okay, and so from looking at these two specific categories of equipment, there are some things that we can kind of start to dissect from this. Is that one, China has the vehicles necessary to conduct a successful amphibious invasion if all things go relatively according to plan. The proper use of their vehicles, such as the IFV and the light tank assets on the shore, will give ground troops the ability to maneuver on the enemy and fight more effectively than just basically offloading 3,000 brave souls onto the beach. Two, the landing craft are great to have, but if there's not a safe beach to land on, there will be a desperate need for more amphibious ships like the Type 075, which was on the previous slide right here, and the Type 072 Alpha and the 072 Triple I variants, which can offload vehicles and troops from the littorals or offshore and not have to drop ramp on the beach to offload troops. Even after a preparatory attack and strikes from the Air Force and Rocket Force, which is almost a guarantee in any amphibious invasion as for preparatory strikes. The Taiwanese will still be able to contest these landings on the beach with direct and indirect fire capabilities, severely limiting the type of landing craft you can bring to shore. This kind of falls back onto the idea that, like, yes, you could in theory load every square inch of Chinese vessels, both military and civilian, with soldiers and ferry them towards Taiwan, but until they have a secure beach and at minimum probably contested airspace above, these soldiers and troops will need armor and a way of making it to shore. Um, and this kind of goes back to the idea of like the Russians attempting to cross the river or attempting to cross the a river in early May of 2022, where they tried to set up all these assets and they just kept getting pounded and pounded and pounded by indirect fire assets such as HIMARS, artillery, I believe. Probably some drones were mixed in, but this kind of gives you an idea that they can't be on the beach setting up floatable docks and stuff where they can start offloading equipment if they haven't actually secured the beach itself and prevented the Taiwanese from firing on the beach for that. So that's why having armor and having forces be able to fight with armor from the ships in the water onto the shore and into the kind of the battlefield on actual Taiwan. It's going to be crucial for allowing the Chinese to kind of make some space for their logistical assets to come in behind them. Okay, so the economic side of it. For this section, I do not want to go about explaining the economic ramifications of choosing to invade because it doesn't necessarily determine how they're going to invade, which is the point that we're kind of looking at specifically. I will say once the decision is made to invade, the sole focus of the government at that point will be on the invasion force, and we will likely see the government and military seize commercial ships and ferries that can/will be used to help facilitate the movement of troops and supplies across the strait. Um, this, of course, will lead to the shrinkage of ships being used by companies, but will undoubtedly be overshadowed by the economic sanctions and isolation China will face from the U.S. and the rest of the Western aligned world. So again, as you can see kind of here on this rough shipping lanes map, it's going to disrupt a lot of this traffic around the outside because one, insurance companies are going to charge extremely high amounts for any shipping containers or shipping lanes that are going to be coming up and down here in the South China Sea and towards the north towards Japan. And it's going to, again, affect military operations in the long run, but necessarily it's not going to deter the Chinese from their initial focus of the invasion whenever they decide to do it. Okay, so for the social aspect, again, trying to keep the scope of this video relevant to the actual amphibious invasion itself. There's not much that will affect them on the coast of Taiwan or even on the shoreline in terms of the social aspect. This can of worms for the Chinese will eventually become one of the largest variables they face when it comes to invading and successfully taking the mega city of Taipei, including the new Taipei district. Which is with both kind of cities combined is approximately 6.5 million people. This will require a massive land force to take and hold, which is why it's so crucial that they establish complete control over all domains in Taiwan, including air and maritime supremacy. And also, too, you can see the Chinese preparations. This was found on Google Earth or through satellite imagery of the Chinese making a mock up of the area around the Taiwanese presidential palace, kind of in preparation or for training aids, preparing for a potential invasion. Okay, so for the information side of it, unlike the Allied invasion in Normandy in 1944, which the Allies were able to play feints and misinformation campaigns to distract the Germans about when and where the invasion would take place, the when question, in a sense, is on China's side. No one really knows if are they going to invade in a year, 2027, 2040. No one really knows exactly when the Chinese are looking to invade. Partially because it will elicit a slower armament of Taiwan by the United States and kind of Western aligned nations, and because also too, China doesn't likely know when it will be fully capable of completing the task at hand of invading Taiwan. So looking at the when question further, we can kind of see from intelligence reports from the West on the months and days prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine that Russia was going to make a play and that it was amassing too much equipment on the border of Ukraine for it just to be a training exercise. And very similarly, whenever the Chinese decide to make preparations for the invasion of Taiwan, there will be almost immediate signs from satellite imagery that will perk the interest of Western analysts and observers. This precisely is when I say that the when question flips on Taiwan's side because they know then that it's going to happen within the year or something like that, or whatever time frame that the Western analysts and their own intelligence analysts gathers when that invasion is going to happen, and they're going to start making. Beach fortifications, stockpiling weapons and food, calling up reservists. They're you name it. They're going to be preparing for the intense fight that is about to go down. Um, the question of where is something that Taiwan can seem to narrow down and make preparations on certain beaches that may give the enemy more of an advantage if taken. But ultimately, the People's Liberation Army will have the final say on when where they are going to attack on the island of Taiwan. And the likelihood is that China would be looking to invade a beach on the western side of Taiwan due to the mountainous region on the island, which divides it into two sections, which the mountains run generally north to south right here. Um, to attack the northern beach portion would put the fight closer to Taipei and its major population centers, which would be more protected overall. There'd be a higher concentration of troops there. But to attack from the south would be away from the large centers of power, but China would be able to make its way up the coast of Taiwan and to make its way through all of Taiwan's residential cities and would finally reach Taipei at the top of it. But with that saying, looking at the Atlantic Wall, which the Germans famously put up in preparation for an eventual Allied re-entrance into Europe from the United Kingdom here, they put up around 5,000 kilometers of defenses all up and down the coast of Europe right here. And what was so impressive about this is that they were prepared pretty well up and down the coast of this, and that's 5,000 kilometers. You're looking at Taiwan here. If you were to measure it from the most northeast corner, which right here would be a pretty awful spot to invade, anyways, but the benefit of the doubt, if you measured from the top northeast corner all the way down to the southern tip of Taiwan, you're looking at 520 kilometers of potential landing to the west. Um, that is extremely small compared to what the Germans were able to put up and make for their defenses here. And just to kind of give you a scale of how much smaller that is, if you take the point right here on the map where Europe is closest to the United Kingdom, or mainland, or like France is closest to the mainland, right here, and you extended it out, this yellow line is 520 kilometers, which would basically only cover this little chunk right here. And even then, the Allies ended up invading down here in Normandy. This is about where Omaha Beach was, where my cursor is. So that just kind of gives you an idea of Taiwan may not know the specifics, but they have a pretty good idea of where this invasion would be coming from. Okay, so looking at the infrastructure variable is one that I feel like China has adequately covered. Fujian province, which is the province right across the strait from Taiwan and mainland China, has experienced the fastest economic growth rate across China in 2022. Looking at the Google Earth screenshots on the right here, these are known military air bases located again directly across from Taiwan and mainland China. And I encourage those interested to look at these bases on Google Earth and to use the historical feature to look at previous photos throughout the years and look at how these bases have developed in sophistication over the past 20 years, with many of them getting significant upgrades in the late 2010s, such as Shuimin in 2017, Longtian in 2020, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Huiyin Air Base in 2021. Nonetheless, these bases are developing in sophistication, likely to be able to accommodate some of the larger transport aircraft, like I believe the Y-20, which is kind of similar to a C-5 equivalent in the Air Force. So, again, uh, the Chinese military recognizes the importance of having these well-established air bases close to the fight. So that's why you can see that they're being developed pretty substantially um, going forward here. And again, these military air bases will be the initial entry point for air assets flown in for the invasion's prep, and unless they are somehow destroyed in a retaliatory strike or some type of counter battery strike against these places, they're going to continue to be important during the actual invasion itself. And then again, looking at infrastructure through a different lens, though, of a total war or a fully mobilized economy around the war, you can start to look at major civilian infrastructure around the Fujian province, which you have Fuzhou Chang'e International Airport here, major airport that is getting built onto the eastern side of it. So this is going to be a very big airport that can adequately house and use um, military vehicles and airplanes and such there. And then again, you have this Fuzhou International Container Terminal. This is going to be a port entry, unload and load cargo ships to get sent across, load ferries with troops, load vehicles, anything like that. This again, civilian infrastructure that can be dual use is going to be incredibly important. And then again, the Xiamen international airport and cargo shipping port located here. So you have an airport located here, again, major. And then over to the west here, you have um, a shipping port and dock. And that's the crucial thing about looking at this is you can't just look at, oh, what military bases do they have available to them? Because in the instance of a war, you're going to be hard pressed to find much civilian airlines flying over um, the South China Sea or anywhere close to the eastern coast of China whenever they decide to make a move on the invasion. Um, but the biggest thing that you can take from this is that the civilian infrastructure is well equipped to support military operations, and that in contrast to kind of how the United States in the global war on terror maybe depended on like level 3 and level 4 trauma centers, which could be in like Ramstein, Germany, or could be super far away from where the fight's going on. Um, uh, China is going to have its some major cities such as Guangzhou with a population of 8.7 million people, Xiamen with a population of 5.1, and Zhengzhou with 5 million people. For reference of the scale of these cities, which are not even their most populated cities, the most recent count that New York City had it at being around 8 million people. So you're talking about New York City level infrastructure for the amount of people there it is. So China has an advantage in that sense of having very industrialized and very modern capabilities and civilian infrastructure near where it would need to stage equipment and resources to get sent to a battlefield or a resupply point in Taiwan. Okay, so for the physical environment, when exploring this topic of how China would go about crossing the Taiwan Strait, this is kind of the variable that I was most looking forward to covering because I don't think enough publicity and enough people are talking about the difficulty and the treacherous conditions of the strait during certain times of the year. Many people have forgotten that, like D-Day, the largest amphibious assault in history, was delayed 24 hours due to poor weather conditions. There was no level of planning or preparation that could that could avoid the weather that had caused it to get pushed from June 5th, of course, to June 6th. There can be at times a sense that since we have created marvels of engineering and large technological innovations beyond what was thought possible in the 20th century, that militaries can now just ignore and push through poor weather conditions or sea conditions. But that's not the case. According to an article put out by the Council on Foreign Relations, the link of which will be in the bio of this video, highly encourage all to take a look at it for its simplicity of demonstrating the key geographical challenges that China will face in its potential invasion. It says from the monsoon seasons throughout the year, which leaves the prime time to invade during the months of April or October. So 2 out of 12 months is a great time for China to stage a long um, or a large scale invasion. Um, and thinking if the PRC would try to choose to invade during the rainy season or monsoon season, you would inevitably have issues with GPS navigation, communication between units and between commanders and their subordinates, and even the possibility of weather conditions changing rapidly when they believed that there was maybe an opportunity. And I want to hit again on the communication between units because with these large scale combat operations, it requires timing and synchronization of when events are going to happen. You can't have one unit, which is supposed to be supported by another unit, showing up 2 hours early whenever it needs to be in sync with a unit going at the same time. So if you're looking at weather, which is going to like potentially disorient drivers or disorient navigational systems for these vehicles to make it ashore or to even make it to the right beach. This is stuff that can majorly affect the success of an operation. And when it comes down to how difficult amphibious operations are alone, this is not something that the Chinese would want to take a risk on for that. And then seems seen similarly in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, both sides have to plan for like a muddy season, which occurs right prior to the onset of winter and follows right after winter when things are slowly starting to defrost. This physical limitation hinders the side which is on the offense and allows the defenders critical time to dig in and prepare for further operations that will resume when vehicles can traverse the roads again. So again, thinking back to the idea that Taiwan is going to be on the defense the entire time, it is going to mainly affect the offense and China's capabilities and how they are actually going to be able to assault the island. And massive nations taking amphibious invasions, unfortunately for China, don't really have the flexibility nor time on their side to turn around and try again another day. So you can't just release all the ships, send them ashore, and then maybe one or two of them land and the rest are on their way, and then you're like, we got to come back. That's not available. Once the ball starts rolling on this, the countdown until American intervention of some kind, which again will already be postured probably surrounding the seas of Taiwan, um, will be inevitable. They have to account for maybe getting a drop on the Americans, having 2 hours, 30 minutes, whatever it is, of uncontested time where they have to try to make it ashore, if that is even afforded to them. But nonetheless, they have to be thinking about other interventions that are going to come into play. The physical environment overall, though, is one variable that China absolutely cannot ignore when planning for an invasion of Taiwan, and is also a variable that they can only make contingencies for and not fully guarantee that it won't be a hindrance or a complete roadblock for their ambitions in the region. Time. Other than being an awesome Pink Floyd song, um, looking at our last operational variable of time, we can see from previous variables where time starts to play an incredibly important role in determining if the People's Republic of China would be successful in their amphibious invasion of Taiwan. As much as the Chinese are studying the Russian invasion of Ukraine and are comparing their situations to the one they may be facing soon, one thing that they may not be able to replicate is the issue of time and how a protracted war like the one we currently see going on may not be possible for the PRC. Their success on the island cannot be dependent on having plenty of time to amass on a land border and then fumbling their way across the flat terrain of the European steppes and continue to leverage their significant railroad system like Russia is doing right now. Again, these are all things that um, China does not have available to them, and uh, that's something that they can't just take as a one-for-one copy off of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict right now. Instead, the Chinese invasion will have to be one of precision and of extreme violence. They must utilize the characteristics of the offense in surprise, concentration, audacity, and tempo, and they have to be as coordinated, violent, sneaky, and as quick as they can in order to overwhelm a Taiwanese response and to demonstrate to outside actors such as the United States that this is not a cause worth fighting over. The timing of this invasion will require the People's Liberation Army to be firing on all cylinders and to be properly trained for the largest military challenge that their nation has ever attempted. So, with the characteristics of the offense, surprise, it's going to be attacking where they're least likely to expect it. Maybe that's a beach um, that the Taiwanese assessed was too hard for the PRC to take, but the PRC is going to do it anyway, and that kind of leads into the audacity part of maybe the Taiwanese didn't think that the PLA and its forces wouldn't be able to do something, but they still did it anyway. Concentration is having mass because, again, there's a quality of quantity in itself. And so, having the amount of troops that you need, having the amount of vehicles, having the amount of logistics available is going to be something that will determine the success of a Chinese operation. And then also tempo as well. You cannot be on a beach for days going forward or be stuck in the mud. This has to be a quick and thorough operation of getting onto the beach and then getting through the Taiwanese defenses on the shoreline and in the first stage to hopefully looking to exploit a break in the line or something like that. Um, they have to use all of these characteristics unanimously and at the same time in order for them to have a chance and to have a good understanding of um, how does success look like for, or what does success look like for them. Okay, so kind of like in conclusion, some big thoughts I have. Looking at the entire operational environment as a whole now, it becomes apparent that the PRC has quite the challenge ahead of them, and it begs the question of whether the CCP and Xi Jinping actually get to the real answer when asking if their military is ready to make a move on Taiwan. Again, looking at how Putin leading up to his invasion of Ukraine was believed to be led on by his surrounding intelligence officers or officials that the invasion would be similar to 2014 in Crimea, and that it would be a 3-day special military operation, and not the 2.5 year bloodbath that his forces and army has faced currently. Xi Jinping might be looking at what happened to Russia and begin looking to crush corruption within the ranks of his military and even want to know the true readiness of his forces. The potential avoidance of a future military disaster might come down to the fact that if he actually gets the truth from his subordinates and actually gets the truth from his leaders of whether China can actually undertake this and whether they're actually ready for this. Um, Again, I just want to thank you all for who've watched this video, and I really would appreciate any feedback you have, either regarding the information presented in this video or the video format itself. I want to continue exploring topics similar to this of whether and I would love any ideas that y'all would want me to tackle. Um, Again, I'm kind of coming at this from a tactical perspective of what the ground soldier and what would be needed for the ground soldier to succeed, but then kind of tying it into a little bit bigger overall arching concepts of international relations and what leaders would have to be considering and how those decisions transfer all the way down to what the average soldier would be looking to expect. Again, I want to thank Perun for his hard work he puts in his videos. He definitely inspired me to kind of come up with this. And then I'm looking forward to whatever happens in the future. Thank you.